Hello, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Giner, and I'm Head of Environmental Sustainability at BT. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar, where we have a special guest. We have David Tobin, who is Senior Consultant at the Carbon Trust, and he will be talking to us about energy auditing for small businesses. But first of all, we would like to do another poll to get to know you better. So could you please let us know what industry you work in? And that should be coming up on the poll. So just give everybody a few moments to select your industry sector. It seems we have a very clear lead on communication, because everybody is saying that they're from there, which is quite interesting, and we haven't had that one before. But thank you, everybody. So just a bit of a background to BT and climate action. That's not something that's new for us. We actually set our first carbon reduction target back in 1992. And by 2016, we had reduced the carbon emissions intensity of our business by 80%. So we decided to be even more ambitious and set another science-based target, which was to reduce our emissions by another 87% by the end of March 2031 and be a net zero carbon emissions business by 2045. 2/3 of BT's end-to-end carbon emissions come from our supply chain. So it's really important for us to engage with our suppliers and encourage them to take climate action, purchase renewable electricity, reduce their energy consumption, and set net zero targets. And I think this year is a very special year. We all have an opportunity to come together to tackle climate change as we see the UN Climate Summit called COP26 happening in November in Glasgow to call for more urgent and ambitious climate action. So that's really what the challenge for me is about in 2021. It's around scale, because to tackle climate change, we need many more to take action, whether that's governments, businesses, large and small, or citizens. And so how do we get more businesses to take climate action? Doing an energy audit is a good way to understand your energy use and think about ways to reduce that, which can lead to cost savings and reduce carbon emissions. So what exactly is an energy audit, and why is that a good thing to do? Which leads me to David Tobin, Senior Consultant at the Carbon Trust. The Carbon Trust is a not-for-profit consultancy. They provide expert advice to businesses and governments on the transition to a low-carbon economy. A bit about David. David has extensive experience in delivering advice to organizations, both private and the public sector, on how they can improve energy management and reduce energy consumption. He's a chartered engineer and provides a wide range of technical advice to Carbon Trust clients across the globe, including provision of audits, technical due diligence, renewable energy projects, and best value procurement of energy saving solutions. So with no further ado, over to you, David, and thank you again. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me, Gabrielle. And yeah, thanks for the introduction. So energy auditing, I've done quite a few hundred by this stage. So hoping to share some of my pearls of wisdom, I guess, from all that experience, and just give you some advice on how it can help you reduce your site consumption, but also play into the whole net zero piece as we progress towards 2050. We're not going to get to our climate targets as a country and as a world without energy efficiency. So energy audits play a key part in that, in helping companies understand exactly where they can reduce consumption. So Gabrielle's already given a great introduction there to the Carbon Trust. For those who aren't familiar with us, we've been around for 20 years or more. And in that time, we started out initially as a government-based organisation, but since about 2008, we've gone independent, and this enabled us to spread our influence across the world with increased the number of consultants, but still driving towards that sustainable low-carbon economy, which has been our aim from the start. As Gabrielle mentioned, we're mission-driven and not-for-profit, but with regards to energy auditing and how it plays a part in our overall mission to drive towards that sustainable low carbon economy, it has been particularly in the early days a real focus, and we were driving towards that sustainable low carbon economy. You conducted over 35,000 energy audits in that time across majority of which are in the UK, and a lot of within small businesses, small medium-sized businesses, but also across the world. And hopefully some of the experience from that we can share with you today. So what is an energy audit, you might ask, and Gabrielle's pitched that question as well. And this is how it's defined within the British Standard of 16247. So I'll just go through this, and then we'll go. It basically sets out the agenda for what I'm going to talk through today. So systematic inspection and analysis of energy use and energy consumption of a site, building, system, or organisation with the objective of identifying energy flows and potential for energy efficiency improvements and reporting them. So really within a defined boundary. So that could be a site, that could be an organisation. Identify where you're using energy. Identify where there's inefficiency within that energy use across the systems, and then explore and build business cases for how to improve that energy efficiency within those systems. And that's what it breaks down to, and that really sets out the agenda for what we're going to cover today when we talk about energy audits. But I'm going to take a step back just before energy audits, before I go into detail on them, and ask. This is really a question for small businesses to ask themselves. How are you currently managing energy? If you're not going to achieve reductions you want to achieve unless you are managing it effectively at the start. So this is an energy management matrix that we ask small businesses or any business size actually when we go to conduct an energy audit, to review and consider how you would perform on this matrix. And we've broken it down into 6 key criteria here, with poor practice at the bottom and good practice at the top. And you can see within that matrix that the first thing we often ask organizations is do you have an energy policy? And you may ask, well, how does a piece of paper with a statement of intent on it save energy? It's by doing that. It's by declaring to the organization, both internally and externally, that you have that intent to reduce consumption within the organization. That demonstrates that the leadership has bought in. Often these are signed by the most senior person within the organization, and outlines how you're going to go about achieving targets of reduction, who's got responsibility for doing that, and timeframes which you're going to achieve these reductions. And making that statement really shows to everyone in the organization that this is something that the company is committed to and is going to strive towards. And within that, it's important to also make sure that within your organization you have that allocated resource across the organization for energy efficiency and for managing energy efficiency. So that might be for reporting and accounting of energy consumption. It might be that senior management has bought in, but it also might be that resources have been allocated further on the more day-to-day management of operational activity, that energy efficiency and energy consumption plays into day-to-day roles down the business, to make sure it's part of your organizational structure. Make sure those that do have that responsibility have adequate training to perform those tasks efficiently. So that might be, again, if it's more accounting around energy management and energy consumption, that those personnel have training in how to do that properly, and equally that those on a day-to-day basis, hands-on operation of a particular piece of equipment, again, are trained in how to use that piece of equipment efficiently. Measuring is key with energy management, so understanding what your start points, your baseline energy consumption, and your ongoing performance against that baseline and against your targets is critical in order to ensure success. communication of responsibility, performance, and company objectives is critical to get that buy-in across the organisation. Equally, communicating externally so that your customers or upstream of your supply chain understand just what you're doing and why you're doing it, and ultimately investment. So investment in time. It does require some time to achieve these, to achieve the savings you want to achieve, but also the financial commitments. There are savings available without spending, without investing, but more than likely at some point you will have to invest some capital in order to achieve the savings. But often there's a strong business case for doing so. So those are the foundations for energy management. Again, we encourage you. This is available in some of the guidance that I'll point you towards later on. But really, is a start point before you conduct an energy audit. So then, what is an energy audit, and how can you go about conducting it? So we've touched on there initially what is involved in an energy audit, but this really breaks it down then into a simplified flow of how you go about conducting an audit, or how we would typically go about conducting an audit if we were engaged to conduct one with an organisation. So starts with a baseline, starts with understanding where you are currently with regards to your consumption, your energy costs, and your carbon emissions within that defined boundary that you're looking to conduct the energy audit. So if it's a site, for example, then obviously the annual consumption, the annual energy costs, and the annual carbon footprint of that site. Look to benchmark that performance. That might be looking to compare yourself with others against industry standard benchmarks, or internally to your own performance measurement benchmarks, and then identify where energy is being consumed on your site and how much each of those elements around your site might be consuming. And then look to identify inefficiency within those processes. So that might be small control changes, adjustments, zero cost measures. It might be investing in improved efficiency equipment. It might be identifying sources of avoidable waste, things like heat recovery, things of that nature. Calculate the saving potential and investment required for addressing that inefficiency. Build a business case to get buy-in from senior management, seek funding for the projects, implement the project, monitor the saving potential, and then once you've gone through that cycle, it iterates again. So it's an ongoing process of improvement is the ideal aim from an energy audit, and you can conduct them reasonably regularly in order to achieve your goals. So let's have a look at each of these elements then as we go through. So starting with the baseline, I'm just going to show some examples of how we might look to present the various elements of an energy audit within our work and with our engagements with customers of the Carbon Trust. So if we're looking at a site in this instance, this is typically how we'd look to present a baseline consumption. So this particular site is consuming a reasonable amount of electricity and natural gas. Look to present the kilowatt hours, so the energy used. We look to present the annual energy cost based on billing information, and we'd also then look to calculate the carbon impact of that energy use, converting the kilowatt hours into tons of CO2 using DEFRA published UK conversion factors for energy use. And again, we'll provide a link to where you can find those later in this presentation. But ultimately, this shows you where you are as a start point, and can help you in setting targets for reduction based on observations on the site. So the next step might be benchmarking. So here is really to then see how you're performing against either others or yourself, and see where you can focus your efforts to improve. So here, Company A, we've compared against two external sources of energy intensity benchmarks. So CIBSE, the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers, and DEC source. You can see here this particular company is relatively high in terms of its electricity consumption, pretty modest in terms of its gas consumption as an energy intensity basis. It gives that company confidence that their gas consumption might be under control, but potentially there's scope for improvement with their electricity consumption. If you can't find, so these are sector specific often within these sort of benchmark sources. If you can't find an appropriate sector then look to benchmark internally. So either find a relative intensity metric to look at your own consumption. So that might be energy consumption by unit produced. It might be energy consumption per unit floor area, as it is in this instance. But try and find something that is going to provide you with a relative measure as you go through and compare your consumption going forward. To the next slide. Oh, sorry, gone too far. Go back a slide. If that works. There we go. So once you know what you're consuming and how that compares to others or yourself in terms of your performance, you might then look to look more closely at your site consumption. Identify where your key energy centers and flows are around the site. So you can see here we've created a static energy profile for a particular site where, again, the consumption is considerable. It's 126,000 pounds a year, pretty much. And we've looked, but based on our observations on site, we've been able to create this profile so that we know, again, what our baseline consumption is for each of these core systems around the site. So in this instance, the workshop heating, the gas on this site was only used for the workshop heating, so we know how much is being consumed there. But for the electricity, the consumption is broken down to a more granular level. So lighting, for example, here we would look at, you can see here the calculation that's used to estimate loading across the site. So we'd count up the number of fittings, the wattage of the lamps, and look there to calculate the total power in kilowatts for that particular system. You'd then multiply that by the estimated runtime during the year, and then again by the unit cost on your billing, and that would then give you the annual running cost for that particular piece of equipment on your site, and again gives you a baseline for that piece of equipment if you're looking to determine inefficiency. Do that for each of your core systems, and you'll end up with a profile that looks a bit like this, so that you can really, identify where you need to focus your efforts in terms of your major energy players on the site. Okay. Now, identifying inefficiency and energy efficiency generally is a very broad subject. I'll share with you some sources for information that you can refer to, but at a very high level, each site is very different. No single energy audit report that I've written is the same as another site, but some of the common observations that we typically see when working with small, medium-sized businesses in the UK are written down here. So, from a lighting perspective, if you haven't got a LED installed currently, highly encourage you to do so. The business case is strong. Lighting, the LED costs have come down considerably, and it's a very effective way to provide better quality lighting often to your workspace. Return on investment, typically 1 to 4 years, depending on sort of end use or current usage of the existing lighting system, and look to implement automated control. So there might be motion sensors or daylight sensors if you've got sufficient light coming in through a warehouse roof light, for example. Make sure you maximize the benefit of that by implementing automated control. Heating, start with controls. So look for weather compensation, so measure adjusting flow temperatures from heating systems based on external conditions, and optimize stop-start. So again, in intelligent heating controls that learns how long your building takes to heat up, how long it takes to cool down, and starts based on external temperatures and starts your system accordingly. And also local control, so perhaps smart thermostatic radiator valves connected to a central thermostat, again to allow that intelligent control across the site. And make sure that the core heating system, in this instance boilers, is of high efficiency, so high efficiency condensing boilers where possible. For ventilation, look to vary flow rates where at all possible. So if you've got a fixed speed fan operating, see if there's opportunity there for varying airflow rates based on, let's say, internal temperatures, internal air quality through smart controls, and vary the speed of that fan via a variable speed drive, and it can bring significant savings with good paybacks. For cooling, key recommendation that we often see is just don't overcool. So don't try and get the room down to 19 degrees if it doesn't need to be there. 24 is often adequate and require a lot less energy to get there. Motors, key recommendation here is to go around your site, understand each of your significant motors, so the kilowatt rating of them, the power rating of them. Understand the efficiency level of those motors, so IE4 rating being high efficiency. You should be able to research the motor from the nameplate on the site, but upgrading them to higher efficiency motors can bring good savings. And also, again, similar to the fans, looking at where there's opportunity across your site to vary the output of the motor based on the input energy supply via a variable speed drive, if there is a variable load on that motor. Compressed air systems, highly inefficient. As a system, you're likely to get about 15% work out of an compressed air system to the electricity that goes in at the start. So look for electric alternatives where at all possible for hand tools, etc. Leak test on a regular basis to make sure you're not wasting the compressed air that goes in, and reduce the pressure of the system. Don't run at a 10 bar when you only need 6 at the end process. And again, variable speed drives, if you've got a variable load, variable speed drive can bring good savings. The building fabric is as your house, insulate your office, insulate your workshop to the best level you can, and reduce drafts with fast closed doors, seals around windows and doors, etc. And renewable generation, the most common one we recommend and see applied is solar photovoltaics to generate energy. And payback, again, is improving all the time, typically 6 to 10 years, based dependent on location, orientation, and pitch of roof. So those are some of the common measures that we see. But as I say, it's a broad subject base, energy efficiency, very high level overview there. There's a range of guides freely available on the Carbon Trust website. Highly encourage you to go along. Again, I'll provide a link at the end of this on this slide deck for sector-specific, technology-specific guidance, where you can really get down to a bit more detail in each of those systems, and general energy management as well. So, presenting the business case for energy efficiency. This is a key part of the energy audit process. So once you know where your energy is being consumed, you know where there's inefficiency, presenting the business case is a critical next step to get that buy-in from senior management to release the purse strings and invest in energy efficiency if that's what's needed. So importance here of the business case being clear and easy to understand, realistic, so that the savings and the benefits of the measure are clearly stated and genuine, so that it builds that confidence to invest, and that the estimates and the quotations are robust, and also that the risks have been assessed, so it's open and honest about where there are risks in the recommendations, so that they can be overcome through the implementation process. And again, this is just a rough example of how we would look to present it within an energy audit report, again to encourage or build that confidence so that the company can act on the measures. So again, looking to identify the issue, the key rationale behind it, which in this case is so low efficiency or not best practice lighting as a start point. The rationale is that there'll be significant energy savings through implementing LEDs. The benefits of energy saving, but also improved lamp life, and reducing maintenance frequency and costs. The risks here are important to outline. So again, mitigated through using a competent contractor and avoiding disruption during working hours by installing out of hours, perhaps at the weekend or overnight. Again, important to point out, so that again it builds that confidence that everything's been considered, and you have that confidence to invest in that we can do this measure, and identify the next steps. So what are we going to do next in terms of engaging contractors? Who's going to be responsible for doing that, and when are they going to do it by? And we've outlined here some of the key design considerations for LEDs as well. And then we'd look to then present the costs and the saving potential for a project. So here, You can see we've clearly stated the cost, and at the bottom in the footnote, we've stated the estimation that goes into achieving that overall capex that's required for upgrading LEDs. In this instance, in a warehouse space, the cost assumed per LED, and this is prior to quotation from the contractor. Again, it's looking to get that confidence and buy-in that the measure is worth spending a bit more time on, and then an estimate of the cost saving, and some clarity again at the bottom around what's included in that. So it's just purely the energy cost saving through the upgrade to LED, not including additional maintenance cost savings, which would bring that payback down potentially even further. Stating the simple payback, here we've calculated net present value and internal rate of return. I'm not going to go into detail on how to do those here. If you've got accountancy people within your organisation, they should be able to give you some steer on how to calculate that. But the strong metrics to show to encourage investment in those measures, and ultimately calculating the carbon saving and what it will contribute to your targets and aspirations as you move towards potentially your net zero commitment. Again, all of these influencing factors to encourage buy-in. And you might look to do that then across your energy systems that you've identified on your site. So identify efficiency measures for each of those systems, if there are any to be had, to identify for a business your total saving potential from an energy and carbon perspective. In this business's instance, nearly 30% of energy consumption and cost saving. So worthwhile, significant investment clearly required here. That's mostly based on the large-scale solar PV system in this instance, but you can see here still strong paybacks overall for a business to consider with regards to a reasonable investment in energy efficiency, but ongoing savings beyond those 5 years with each of these measures. Some things to consider for success of implementation. So make sure we obtain that senior buy-in. That strong business case can really help with that. Consider starting small, so maybe start on some of the smaller capex measures, some of the ones you have more confidence in, to build that confidence that this is a worthwhile exercise. Engage with quality suppliers. So I'll provide a link to our Green Business Directory that the Carbon Trust host, where you can engage some suppliers that could potentially help. But there are, again, make sure that you do your due diligence on those that you are bringing into your business to do energy efficiency work. Make sure you allocate that personnel and adequate internal resource to make sure that the project is a success, and ultimately that resource is also responsible for monitoring outcomes potentially. So that's critical again to get further buy-in with measures, to make sure that it's just not a one-hit thing. You've got a continual process of monitoring that this was worthwhile, let's do it again on this particular other technology, and that can really help with further buy-in. And timing can also be important. So seasonal change, as you move into a heating season, considering ahead of that inefficiencies, to make sure that when you move into it, you're well set is important. So recently we've been supporting BT with some supply chain energy audits, and this is a case study of a recent one that we thought we'd share with you as well, again to show the potential benefit. So this was earlier this year, conducted an energy audit for an architectural company in London, SMEs Robson. We conducted an on-site assessment with them, and identified, you can see here, a list of key measures that we've again touched on during this presentation, where LED lighting, switching from a central hot water system to a local point of use hot water system, optimizing their server and cooling arrangements, improving their heating control and heating system efficiency, and some solar PV renewable energy generation, could lead to an energy saving potential of 32% for this particular business, worth over £13,000 per year, with a payback of under 4 years. And liaising with SMEs Robson, this is potentially going to be a significant contributor to them and their carbon targets, and they're currently going through a process of reviewing the implementation of these and seeing how they can take a lot of these measures forward to contribute to their ambitious carbon targets. So again, shows here the benefit of an energy efficiency audit to a business in terms of striving towards carbon and energy reduction. So how do so that's a summary of what is involved in an energy audit, in as briefly as I can possibly go through it. But how does that play into the whole broader net zero piece, and why will they be important in terms of companies achieving their net zero ambitions? So I'll share with you here some guidance on I guess a call to action to net zero. First of all, from the SME Climate Hub, there's a link on the slide here to where you can get some more information on that, and what net zero means essentially, or might mean to your business if you are looking to make a commitment to achieve net zero by 2050. Essentially, what this commitment means is that you'll be looking to halve your greenhouse gas emissions before 2030 and achieve net zero emissions by 2050, and disclose that progress towards that ambition year on year. So again, it's making sure that you have that resource and that ongoing monitoring that we talked about at the start with regards to your energy management, to be able to report against this target and progress towards it, conducting energy audits, identifying where there's energy efficiency, carbon reduction potential within your business, and an ongoing cycle towards those targets. We've provided a bit more detail on what is involved in that commitment here. So and again, this outlines all of the scopes within a carbon footprint. I would encourage you to watch. We've recently hosted another a webinar with BT, my colleague Andy Stevens, talking about carbon footprinting. If you want more details on the specifics of carbon footprinting, I'd encourage you to watch that as well. I believe that's up on shared widely on YouTube. So this commitment is really focused on your direct emissions, so scope 1, which is your gas use within your buildings and your company vehicles. It's also focused on your scope 2, so your indirect emissions, which is primarily your purchased electricity, plus a bit of your scope 3, which is indirect, deemed upstream, but it's your business travel that is typically included within this target that has been set by the Business Climate Hub. There is a wider ambition to reduce broader scope 3 emissions, but this should be, I guess, your primary focus, is reducing those over which you have most control. So with that in mind, what might that mean, and what could you consider doing over the next few years as you build up towards that target? So start with calculating your carbon footprint. So as we showed there, if you are just in an office building, look to calculate your energy consumption within that building, and then use that to calculate your carbon footprint. And again, encourage you to watch the other webinar on carbon footprinting if that is something you need assistance with. But include your vehicle emissions and any process emissions. So that might be refrigerant leakage from your cooling systems, plus some business travel. So identify again your baseline as you would do in an energy audit for your carbon footprint. Set those targets for reduction and the time frame for achieving net zero. So you've seen those on the previous slide there, looking to halve your emissions by 2030. And look to optimize the efficiency of your buildings and vehicles. So you've seen there that the process we've gone through for energy auditing a building. If you've got several buildings, you could do that on your entire building stock. You could do similar with your vehicle fleet. Baseline, identify areas of inefficiency, identify ways you can improve and reduce your vehicle emissions. Procure electricity from renewable sources. Now, zero carbon electricity supplies are widely available now, so you should be able to, and often cost competitive with fossil fuel based alternatives. So that's a good way to reduce the carbon footprint of your electricity. Fossil fuels in buildings is a big challenge. You're going to have to look to, at some point, move away from fossil fuels within your building. So it's worth considering, where you might have a gas boiler system, what is the potential for switching to something like a heat pump as an alternative, or explore alternatives, other alternatives in that area. But it's a critical challenge, because if you're not going to be able to be reliant on natural gas if you have ambitions for net zero. And also look for electrification potential within your vehicle fleet, becoming more and more common, particularly if you've got small vehicles that are traveling short distances. Infrastructure is improving all the time. vehicles are improving all the time, look to build a time frame for switching to electric vehicles. Review your options for removing refrigerant leakage from your business. If you've got cooling systems, minimize leakage with regular maintenance. Look to switch to low global warming potential refrigerants in the future. And then look to engage with your value chain. So upstream to your suppliers, downstream to your customers. How can you influence them to reduce consumption and emissions to contribute towards wider carbon savings? And then at the last point, once you've squeezed everything you can out of efficiency and carbon reduction activity within your business, at some point you might need to consider purchasing permanent greenhouse gas removals for balancing off remaining emissions. But that should very much be the end point for getting to net zero. Okay, so some support and resources. So I've already touched on the SME Climate Hub. Again, there's some great resource here that can take you through some of the aspects we've talked through today. So looking for ways of reducing or steps to cut your emissions, ways you can go about setting a target, measuring and reporting emissions, etc. Then there's also some other information available online. So you might look to greenhouse gas reporting protocol for footprinting, and also then there's the DEFRA greenhouse gas conversion factors, which will allow you to convert from energy to carbon. These are updated on an annual basis and publicly available online. And then we have the Carbon Trust online carbon footprinting tool as well, which you can use and utilize to help you calculate your carbon footprint. You just enter in your energy consumption and it will allow you to calculate your footprint and give you guidance and help there. There's also, as stated previously, a wide range of Carbon Trust guides available online. So all of those sector and technology specific guidance is available, free to download. So encourage you to avail of those if you want some more specific information around energy efficiency. We've also a YouTube channel with a wide range of, most of those guides have been translated into webinars so that you can find out more detail about each of those systems. And if you're looking to contact suppliers, we host something called the Green Business Directory, where we accredit suppliers based on continued strong practice of implementing energy efficiency measures. So you can search for a particular technology type there if you're looking to implement with confidence. And lastly, if you're looking for some financial support, there are various pop-up or fixed term grant schemes available around the country, but very much encourage you to consider investing at the moment. There's a very recent introduction as the 130% super-deduction, which is first year relief on qualifying main rate plant and machinery investments up until the end of March 2023. So in this example here, you can see that by investing, if you were to spend £100,000 on a piece of equipment for your business, the corporation tax deduction will be £130, giving you corporation tax relief of 19% on that, which is nearly £25,000 saving for that particular piece of kit. And you can see here some of the equipment that might apply to. So some of the ones we've mentioned, things like solar panels, it could be compressors, refrigeration units. So if you are thinking about investing, do consider this as a benefit to doing it and worthwhile doing now. So that was everything I was looking to cover. Thank you for listening. Gabrielle, I don't know if there's been any questions, but happy to take any that you may have or that have come in from the audience.
Yeah, no, great. So thank you so much, David. Just as you were going through and you talked about training and all these amazing resources that are out there, I guess if you're a small business, who in the organization would typically do this training and get involved in this kind of project? So, I guess you might not have obviously dedicated people to this area. So where does it tend to fit? Is it the financial function maybe, or?
Yeah, so the people I speak to when I go and conduct an energy audit can be from a wide range of areas within the business. Normally, when I work with a business, the energy tends to sit with finance, as you say, from an accounting perspective, because it is a bottom line cost for business operation. So there tends to be various levels of responsibility. So yeah, yes, on an accounting and monitoring perspective, it does tend to sit within finance. Again, it's about making sure that those that sit within the finance, that they obviously have a good understanding about monitoring costs within the business, but that they understand the slight nuances with regards to energy consumption, and that they're able to identify patterns and irregularities, and that they are in contact with those with more hands-on use of equipment on the site, or vehicle drivers, things of that nature, so that they understand those patterns, and that they can analyze those against might be certain variables within the business, be that output, be that weather, to make sure that they are monitoring that and managing it in the same way they would any other cost base within the business, because it is slightly different, and there are some complexities to it. With regards to sort of I guess other engagement I'd have within a business, typically then I'd be handed to someone who has more on-site responsibility. It might be a maintenance manager, something like that, who then has a great understanding of all of the equipment operating in the site, and how everything works, why everything works like it does, and it's important that those two responsibilities do communicate and work together closely, so that you really do reap the benefits. Often there are real gems of knowledge within sort of the maintenance operatives' understanding of the site with regards to inefficiency, that don't necessarily make their way to those sitting with the monitoring responsibility in finance. So it's important, and we often serve as that middleman or middle person, if you like, to connect those two responsibility areas. So there's a range of responsibilities within the business, but it's making sure that at the top down there is a responsibility framework. Everyone knows everyone's responsibilities, and there's a line of communication between them. That's really the only way to ensure effective efficiency implementation through the business and good energy management.
Okay, well, great, thank you. So a couple of questions that have come in that are related here, I think. One, do you see energy auditing becoming compulsory for SMEs? And do you think energy reduction targets will be incentivized beyond reducing energy bills? Will there be a bonus or a levy placed on companies not meeting targets and not, and failing to reduce energy consumption?
Yes, so I'll answer the first question first on will energy audits become compulsory for SMEs. So they have done for larger companies, which I think is probably where the question came from. So large companies are required to conduct energy audits through the Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme every 4 years on a rotational basis. At the moment, there's no talk of it necessarily becoming compulsory for SMEs to do that, and I haven't heard word that is likely to be the case. Certainly, there's been mandatory requirement now through the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting Initiative to again make it mandatory for large companies to report in their annual reports their energy performance, energy and carbon performance. I would say that's more likely to become a more common and mandatory part for SMEs, because it is good practice. It's easier to do, and when people are making energy consumption and carbon emissions public knowledge, it encourages that action. So I'd say that's more likely that carbon and energy reporting becomes mandatory rather than energy auditing. Could you read the second part again for me, Gabrielle?
Yeah, sorry. Do you think energy reduction targets will be incentivized beyond reduced energy bills? Will there be a bonus or a levy placed on companies not meeting targets?
Again, for large companies, things like the exemption from the climate change levy are available through things like climate change agreements. which gets you a reduction in cost on your bills. Again, because of the number of SMEs and the complexity of the SME space, I think it's more difficult to implement there. So I'm not aware of potential targets or incentives for doing that beyond the general energy saving. I think as energy costs, that they are likely to continue to increase as we progress towards more complex and renewable energy systems that have to be invested in to get there. Energy costs will likely increase, and that will likely incentivize savings further. But I think for the SME space, it's likely to be more to do with I guess lots of pressures. So pressures from customers, people, big companies not wanting to use smaller companies that don't have these targets, that don't have strong energy management and carbon reduction systems in place. Things like that, I think, are going to be more drivers than regulation or mandating these sorts of things for small businesses.
Okay, well, thank you. So you mentioned, energy audits every 4 years, but ideally, how often should a company conduct an energy audit, in your experience?
Yeah, I think it can depend on the scale and complexity of an organization. So if you're operating just from a single office, then I would that energy audit cycle I showed, where you do a baseline, you identify the energy drivers, you identify inefficiency, etc., and you loop back round. Ideally, you should complete that loop before you do it again. If there's still inefficiency you haven't rectified, then look to do that. And so it might not be a defined time period. I'd say 4 years is kind of a maximum that I would look. A company might look to do that on an annual basis if you were maintaining an ISO 50001, which is the standard for energy management systems, for best practice in energy management systems. That would recommend an annual review process, and it might not be as detailed as the first, but at least it's a cycle and a consideration of where you are relative to that first assessment of inefficiency within the business. If you're a larger, more complex organization, it might take you a year or two or more to get round all of your various premises. But I think completing that cycle for each site is what's important, perhaps, rather than the cycle and duration required between each one. But I'd say 4 years is the maximum there, as mandated by ESOS for large companies.
So I think just finally, David. So I've heard this, and kind of just to summarize what you've been talking about. So I'm really excited. I want to go, and I'm going to go and do my energy audit tomorrow. So where do I start? What do I do, and why? Again, just summarize for us. Why should I be doing it?
Okay. We'll start with a bit of reflection on where you are with regards to energy management. Do you understand your energy consumption within your business? And really start with that investigation piece into where you need to focus your efforts, creating that understanding of where you're really consuming energy within your business. What is the real impact of your carbon footprint? What is going to be the most significant benefits to the business if you did improve the efficiency of it? And spend a bit of time understanding it, engaging with those involved with the day-to-day process of it. And that would be very much the start point, is really understanding your energy consumption. That I work with a number of businesses who have invested in LED lighting and have some good sort of fleet management practices in place, but actually there's a piece of equipment sat in the corner of the site that's churning around 24/7 that hasn't really been considered, that is actually the main energy center of the site. So really spend a bit of time really getting to know your organization and your organization's energy use would be the first step that I would recommend, certainly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, David Tobin from the Carbon Trust, for being with us here today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope that you've learned something new, and that you feel inspired to take action on energy, please reach out to us on social media and let us know how you enjoyed today's session. As I said at the beginning, for me, this year is very much about scale on climate action and getting more companies, whether small or large, involved in this critical year. And to help small businesses, you will have seen it in the chat, and David mentioned it. Please go and visit the UK Business Climate Hub. This is an initiative by the UK government. It provides a lot of tips and advice on how to reduce emissions in your business, how to set a net zero targets, things that you could be doing. And if you want to rewatch this session, the YouTube link will be posted in the Q&A. And our next BT Climate event will be on the 1st of July at 10:30, where we'll be joined by Tessa Clark, who is the co-founder and CEO of Olio, who will share her company's sustainability journey and what she has learned on the way. So if you want to sign up, the registration link will be shared as well. And thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, David. And hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.